April 19th, 1868, Paul Harris is born in Wisconsin to a family who's so poor that 3 years later, they moved to Vermont to live with his father's father, his grandfather, in Wallington, Vermont, just in order to survive. Try to visualize how difficult it would be to take a trip at that time in the mid-1800s, that great a distance from Wisconsin to Vermont. Cars hadn't, for all practical purposes, even been invented. Now I'll skip ahead to 1900 when Paul Harris met up with fellow attorney Bob Frank for dinner on the north side of Chicago. They walked around the area, stopped at shops along the way, and Harris was impressed with how Frank got along with so many people, how there seemed to be such a warm relationship, and how everybody seemed to know each other and get along as they walked along. Harris hadn't seen that kind of camaraderie since he moved to Chicago, and he was very impressed. It reminded him of his days in Vermont when people were warmer and friendlier. Eventually, Paul Harris persuaded local businessmen to join him in a club for community and fellowship. They called it Rotary because they rotated from one site to another for their meetings. Rotary of St. Albans, or the St. Albans Rotary Club is more commonly called, is a small part of Rotary International, a worldwide organization. It's the goal of the 1.2 million Rotarians worldwide who are community leaders to come together to create positive, lasting change in our communities and around the world. Our differing occupations, cultures, and countries give us a unique perspective. Our shared passion for service helps us to accomplish the remarkable. Let me give you some perspective on the year 1924 when St. Albans received its charter for membership in Rotary International. Calvin Coolidge was President of the United States. It was the Roaring '20s. Prohibition was in effect. Roaring '20s, Prohibition, well, the bootleggers, I guess. Women had only had the right to vote for 5 years. Public radio stations only began in 1921. St. Albans wouldn't have theirs until 1929. Phones were pretty much a new thing. The rotary phone had just come out that year. Airplanes were mostly biplanes. 4 U.S. Army planes set off to make a trek to see if they could travel around the world. 2 made it. It took them 175 days. Ford introduced the world to driving its first Model T 16 years earlier. In 1924, they made almost 2 million runabouts. Retail price, $265. About what you're getting for Ford today, right, Bert? That's right.
Adjusted translation.
Our club received its charter on October 8th of 1924. The real father of the St. Albans Rotary Club was Dr. Ralph Perry of Morristown, New York. Dr. Perry was also the founder of Camp Kilcare, a camp for boys that was first actually located where my home is now, and then moved to the island across the way, and eventually to what's now the Camp Kilcare State Park. Another member of the founding club was Greg Smith. He was the son of Governor Smith. It was the Smith family that gave the fountain in Taylor Park as a gift to the community. I'll talk a little bit more about our recent work with the fountain for the very new members. The club first met at noon on Thursdays, and for those of you who are history buffs, you'll enjoy hearing the names of some of our locations. They met at the tavern at the Jesse Weldon Inn. Meetings later were changed to Mondays. During the summers of 1927 through 31, they met at the Champlain Country Club. They also met at the American House and at Therion's Restaurant on the corner of Kingman and Federal Streets, later the Cornerstone. From 1947 through 65, meetings were moved to Tuesdays, and they met at the Owl Club 3 seasons of the year, and then they met at the Edgewater Pavilion during the summertime. After bouncing around a little bit, in the late 60s, the Rotary Club settled into the Governor Smith Inn at the top of Congress Street. From there, we went to the Owl Club, and then to our present quarters here at the Masonic Hall. Rotary has a proud tradition of service to the people of Franklin County. It's a frequent contributor to programs that provide youth development, assistance to needy families, and to building, renovating, and growing assets in our community. Governor John Smith was one of St. Albans' most prominent citizens of all times. At the time he established residence here, he developed a system of railroads throughout Vermont and into Canada and down into Connecticut, served as governor of the state of Vermont. At that time, there was a single St. Albans. It was St. Albans Village. It encompassed what now is St. Albans City and Town. And it was then, as it is today, the county seat. The contributions of Governor Smith and his descendants are many. Of particular interest is that Greg Smith was a founding member of St. Albans Rotary, and that the Smith family gifted to their friends and neighbors the fountain in St. Albans Village Park. 37 years later, on October 8, 1924, Greg Smith was one of those 25 who joined with Dr. Ralph Perry to get the charter for this club. We have a long history of giving. It's been our policy to support worthwhile projects, but not necessarily run them, and to place emphasis on providing startup and one-time funds rather than just becoming part of another group's income stream. In 1918, remember that, Bert? 1918? Seems like only yesterday, right? Rotary sponsored the first Boys Week in St. Albans. It was so successful that the Rotarian magazine recommended it as a model for other clubs. After the flood of 1927, again, keep in perspective what things were like, what roadways were like, what transportation was like. In 1927, the Rotary Club of St. Albans served Thanksgiving dinner to 250 people from Johnson, Vermont, to help them during the time that they were trying to recover from that flood. In 1957, Dr. Carl Marshall was president. Did I see Steve here? Steve's not here today. He could foresee skiing as a potential big tourist business in Vermont and felt our young people should know how to ski, and that was the birth of the Rotary Ski Bus program that now brings, until recently, as many as 7 bus loads of kids to Smuggler's Notch every week during the winter. And yes, that does make it our 60th year of this program. As I mentioned, Dr. Marshall is Steve's father, and Steve told me an interesting story that his dad had told him that one of their big fundraisers was for each club member to invest $5 and see how much money they could turn that $5 into over a 3-week period. It was during the holiday season, and Doc Marshall used the $5 to buy in bulk some aspirin and some pink placebos. He packaged 2 each and sold them for $1 a package under the label of Doc Marshall's Hangover Cure. He won. In 2002, he donated $75,000 for the purchase of additional land at Hardack, Aldous Hill for additional playgrounds and sports fields. We funded the introduction of a history-based education program that got rave reviews from our local schools and was a model for the state in conjunction with the with the museum. We built a major playground in St. Albans Town Park. We funded a new roof for the Samaritan House, now Tim's House. A roof for the building that shelters the homeless. Needs don't get much more basic than that. We funded the construction of a special media room as part of the library expansion. We helped feed the hungry at Martha's Kitchen, provide joy at Christmas through programs like Operation Happiness and Hannaford's holiday food boxes that Christine told us about earlier. We funded the purchase of a van to meet the special transportation needs of residents with wheelchairs. We've contributed to past and now recent renovations and expansions of the Northwestern Medical Center Hospital. We built the original walking path that surrounds the Collins Pearly Sports and Fitness Center. We've made those with physical challenges feel good about themselves through support programs such as Special Olympics and Unified Sports. Rotary of St. Albans has done so much to serve our community, but at the same time, we're part of something much bigger. Butch Hebert has traveled to Honduras 2 or 3 times to help build school buildings through a Rotary International project. A plaque commemorates our contribution there. We've been part of the worldwide program to eradicate polio through the Polio Plus program, and we're almost there. When over 100 businesses come together in the spring of each year to participate in the St. Albans Rotary Home and Recreation Expo, it leads as a kickoff to their spring business. Many businesses leave there with leads that are important to their very survival and certainly to their prosperity. To say nothing of the fact that it creates a pure fun opportunity for people of our community. Having grown up in St. Albans, when I returned after graduating from college in 1972, I was looking to develop relationships with other professionals, and I cared about the community. I feel I was very lucky to have found Rotary. I found people like J. Gregory Smith. The hard-charging leaders of the day were Bob Barker and Bob Bliss, Ted Tyler, Dick Hungerford, Wes Kidder. I've come to realize that Rotary is what we make it. Week to week, we make it an enjoyable place for lunch. Each of us will decide how much we want to serve, how involved we want to be in our club. Today's members, especially some of the newer members, will be those who will decide where this club will be in 5 and 10 years from now. And I challenge you to bring not only your interest in our community, but your ideas for our community. I challenge you to use your enthusiasm not to rise on the coattails of seniors, but to invigorate us. You're right, we need it, don't we, Steve? And you know, I try not to look at you.
I know, I represent that.
I challenge you not to settle in as followers, but to step up and lead. Rotary is not meant as a training ground of leaders. It's an organization that accepts people who have already displayed leadership qualities. I'd like to take just a moment to mention a couple members in particular that some of the newer people perhaps don't know as well. And I apologize for leaving out some who probably should be mentioned, but that's just what happens sometimes. Steve Marshall, once legislature's in session, isn't here because he serves as Assistant Secretary of the House? Senate. Thank you. Oh, it's right here. Assistant Secretary of the Senate since 1984. I wrote this a few weeks ago and hadn't had a chance to review it since. Anyway, as a Rotarian, he's displayed dedication to the Rotary Foundation and as its leading contributor from our club. If you want to know anything about the Rotary Foundation, he's a guy to talk to. Warren Hamill is the sole spokesman for 35 million South Koreans and the United Nations in dealing with the North Koreans and Chinese for many years on that border. He's been one of our strongest leaders and driving force behind Expo, past president, Paul Harris fellow. If you don't know Warren, new members, interesting fellow. John Newton, president of the Franklin County Museum, graduate of Norwich University. He served as club secretary for many years. He's now working on a project with Steve to have past minutes of our meetings, or club bulletins, I should say, downloaded to digital form so they can be kept for prosperity. Carl Rosenquist is pretty busy since he won election to the legislature. What many of you don't know is he was a member of the Peace Corps serving in New York City. He's one of our most active Expo supporters. For many years he helped with oversaw logistics, and I challenge anybody to try to sell more raffle tickets. Larry Bruce, one of the last men standing today in our old folks contest. Sometime talking to him about hiking, fishing, any of those topics. Larry has walked the entire long trail, correct? True. Helped to lay out the path at Collins Purley, past president, Paul Harris fellow. Been a member since 1972. Some of our other long-serving members that weren't here to be recognized, I'd like to mention. George Costas. George's health isn't what it used to be, and what I'd like it to be, but he still has that Rotary spirit and always will. He's been a member since 1958. Ken Kay joined in 1970. I think most of the older other members that I had noted are here today. We hear about the quote of the day every week. First introduced by Jess Bugby. Jess is an avid hunter and fisherman. He's led the club on through several events honoring our servicemen and women, events that were truly proud moments for us. And he too is a past president and Paul Harris fellow. And Carrie Johnson, who along with Jill Berry Bowen, I credit for Saving Expo. He's been a long and loyal member of our club. But Expo had suffered from years of stagnancy, I guess I'd say. And the two of those ladies stepped up and with the help of a lot of people, including some very important support from People's Trust Company, turned that thing around to something we're pretty proud of. So hats off to Carrie. By the way, I think Carrie's only won one really big prize in her life, and that was at a demolition derby. Watch her if she's coming the other way.
I thought you were going to say Bob.
That's a given, Jesse.
I'm going to open the floor up so members can tell me what things I may have missed, but before I do, I have a parting word for you, and that is that I would like to speak to you today about Rotary's four-way test. I can honestly say that of the hundreds of people who have come and gone from this club in the 45 years that I've been a member, nearly all have lived their lives by Rotary's four-way test. You, me, all of us are asked to consider in the things we think, say, and do. Is your cell phone turned on? No. And the things we think,
My watch is on.
of course, yours is a watch. And the things we think, say, and do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? When I follow this test, I gain respect. When I falter, respect is lost. I thank all of you for accepting this challenge. Rotary will give you as much as you want to take, but to really benefit from Rotary, you must be more interested in giving than in taking, because Rotary's motto, after all, is service above self. That's my little walk down memory lane. What have I missed? You know what I missed before I forget? Capon project? No, that's not your thing. Go ahead.
The fountain, you didn't tell them about the recent.
I did. I skipped right over the fountain. See, I knew what time it was, even though I didn't have a clock out. The work on the fountain, to restore the fountain, for the newer members, St. Albans has been trying to figure out a way to restore that fountain for years. It just couldn't continue the way it was. And without Rotary picking up that project, who knows what would have happened to it. My guess is by now or shortly after would have had to be torn down. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to fumble to find my notes, but the people who led that committee did an incredible job under the leadership of Tom Gallagher, but with a tremendous amount of work from a lot of people. Peter Garso put in more hours than I could care to even imagine, and saved that project more than once, and I mean really saved that project. Dana Rushlow did a great job with fundraising and getting people set up to be on the back of the benches and so on. So yeah, big project, and we should talk about that more often. I think we're going to have an event in the spring and bring that up again. Yeah, one of the projects I forgot to mention early on, when I first joined the club, our big project was the Capon project. It was first introduced by former BFA principal Jesse Sunderland, thank you, who was BFA principal, but before that had been an agricultural teacher at BFA. And at the time, 4-H was really big everywhere, including at BFA. So, help me, Larry, if I get this wrong, but I think each of us paid for maybe 30 chickens.
Yep.
Students got the 30 chickens each, and at some given point, they would caponize them. Caponizing means neuter them, I guess, for lack of a better term, and that helps them to grow bigger faster. There'd then be a competition. All the birds would be judged after they were slaughtered and cleaned, so on and so forth, and each Rotarian would get one bird, and the rest of the birds, whoever raised them could sell. That was one of our big projects back in the old days. What else did I miss for big projects?
$10.
What's that?
I think it was $10 from each of us, too.
Was it that much?
Yeah,
Yeah.
5 or 10.
Which, yeah. And we were supposed to go and visit our chickens. I must admit I never did. I bet you did.
I think they're
You did? Yeah. John?
Auction in the park.
Oh, the auction in the park. That was our biggest fundraiser. And for many years, every Rotarian would get a list of about 20 businesses they had to solicit. And they had to go out and try and get items to be donated for the auction in the park. And we would also go out and clean our attics and our neighbors' attics and our neighbors' neighbors' attics. And the Santa Train's another good one. And the project was an enormous amount of work for not that awfully much money, and there were some great stories that came out of that. But when the auction in the park was over, there'd always be items left over. And a lot of items. And Bob Bliss would stand up as auctioneer. Bob was a tremendous Rotarian, a tremendous community member, and a great auctioneer. And he would auction off to the Rotarians all the stuff that nobody, including Rotarians, wanted. And whoever tried to divert their eyes from his would be sure to be the winner of whatever bid he was coming up with. Yeah, we did the Santa Train combined with, we worked with the railroad and took kids on a trip on the railroad just before Christmas time for, I don't remember if it was multiple weekends or all just one day. I think it was just one day. It was a nice round trip, and it got to the point where we couldn't get insurance anymore, had to abandon the program. We also had, I think, a fall foliage train 1 or 2 years, right? Yeah. Same problem there, yeah.
But the Moore's still.
Yes, yeah, great event, but liability. What else did I miss? What other activities have we done?
One comment on the ski bus, I just mentioned to Gary, that you're concerned with the dropping numbers. It's been up and down over the years. We've had as few as 2 buses for
Yeah.
many occasions.
Yeah. Yeah,
Also,
there
I think it
are
started at
cycles.
Smugglers, went to Jay, back at Smugglers, back to Smugglers now.
That's why I wanted to compliment Carrie on doing such a good job with the expo, because clearly under her current guidance, the ski bus program is faltering. Yeah. I'm out of time. I want to thank you very much for being so attentive and for being fellow members of St. Albans Rotary. Thank you.
Thank you.